Hey there all, Omen here from Transition Partners, here for another episode of Leadership Lessons in Cyber. Hi Micah, how you doing? You okay?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Man. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for taking some time to speak to me today. I suppose on
Of
this
course.
podcast we tend to go around the cyber route, and my role actually is mainly the Microsoft security piece. And I know that's what you've been doing. That's what your speciality is. But for everyone who's listening, just give me an idea for a bit about you, what you do, where you're at, and yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So my name's Micah Heaton. I live in the Pacific Northwest, specifically just about 30 minutes south of Seattle, in the Microsoft headquarters, actually. And I've spent about 15 years in the enterprise services space. So a number of years working help desk, doing long graveyard hours for a network operations center, field calls, replacing servers before everybody moved to the cloud. And it's really been in the past 5 years, especially out here. I did a stint with Microsoft as a contractor working on the Intune support team. Spent about the past 5 years really working on Microsoft's enterprise mobility and security stack, as well as the Defender stack. So right now, helping folks move to the cloud in a secure way and coaching them through some of the decision making. As an individual, that's definitely a hobby, but I've got a family, couple of kids. We spend a lot of time together out here in the forest, and it's one of the things we love about the Pacific Northwest. So thank you
Yeah.
for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries. And you spent some time in Honduras, Mexico, so you're back from a holiday all tanned and
Yep.
excited to speak to you. So you've you've talked a lot about your Microsoft piece, but then the technical route as well that you've been on. Now your role is pretty blended, where you deal with clients, but then you also are deep diving into the technology.
For
Tell
sure.
me a bit about how your roles evolved as time goes on and where you see your role going as well.
Yeah, Microsoft is a big entity with a lot of products that in the portals themselves are quite connected and integrated, but as an organization, it's fairly compartmentalized. So some of the work that I've done is played a bit of a glue person, a bit of a culture person, helping various components of our organization, specifically the company I work for, Blue Voyant, understand where the Microsoft trajectory and product roadmap is heading and what that means for our organization internally, who needs to be connected that otherwise wasn't. So to give you a sense of that, we have professional services in the legacy sense, traditional incident response capabilities, compliance readiness capabilities, a federal sector for federal consulting. And then we have a traditional managed detection and response offering that blends best in breed capabilities, which includes Microsoft. And those sides of the house are not always talking to each other, but Microsoft's technology spans across the spectrum of security enablement and is really required somebody like me to kind of sit in between product marketing and the delivery teams and just make sure everybody's all on the same page about what Microsoft's doing and how they can all independently be enabled for the better part of the whole.
And you said it yourself. The Microsoft ecosystem's big. You've got Dynamics, security, cloud. The list can go on. What's your superpower in that space? Yours specifically.
Yeah, my background historically was in device management, the end user compute side. Is the end user compute situation solvent? Is the user base dealing with something that could be solved by a centralized management control plane, or do you have your IT staff walking around, sitting in front of the user's computer and trying to troubleshoot a problem? Historically, that's been my superpower, the place where I live, but something interesting has happened where Microsoft has actually blended the device management strategy with the the endpoint security strategy really well, really comfortably. So a few years ago, I was really able to make a wholesale cutover into Microsoft security stack. So that device management background really helps me have conversations with customers, deliver key insights that allow them to blend those things. Because truly, most organizations have separate end user compute spaces and security operations teams, and they don't always talk to each other. So my superpower has, with in front of customers, has followed my personal professional track in that moving from device management into endpoint security enables me to have conversations with both hemispheres of customer organizations and get them having conversations. And it's something that requires a little bit of tact, not to say that they're agnostic hemispheres, but that compartmentalization is traditionally there for a reason, so they can make decisions in a silo. And my superpower is knocking those silos down, man.
I like it. And you've obviously worked very much client side, internal side, building the teams. But let's look at the macro environment now. And a topical conversation now is the Microsoft layoffs, right? Everyone's talking about it and what's been going on across the world regarding tech in general. But the
Yeah.
security space, I read an article, the security space for Microsoft booming. The revenues are at a record high, I think 33%. How has that affected, your business, your own, I suppose, business unit as well in terms of growth and what you're offering to customers?
To be honest with you, Aman, I felt quite spoiled. I felt quite privileged to work in a space and in an industry that has been so resilient in the face of what the world has been dealing with the past few years. To see Microsoft's stock go up year over year and the spend that customers are willing to put in Azure specifically as they continue their journey into the cloud has enabled me to continue to have a very productive and more or less secure employment. I know that a lot of folks, even in the tech space, haven't felt as comfortable or as confident about their job and their employment month over month. So just as a professional in this space, it has felt I've been very self-aware, um, very aware that the industry I work in, cybersecurity, is something that organizations require no matter what the world's dealing with, and that Microsoft technology in particular has been able to thrive in the face of that. It's something that I think about a lot and I'm pretty open with customers about. Um, I'll add to the answer that I think the strategy around Microsoft is at the moment to help customers understand what the vendor consolidation opportunity is and where organizations are cutting costs and facing uncertain economic and financial futures. There is an opportunity to centralize their technology around the Microsoft licensing in a very cost efficient way. So in addition to coaching security decision making, I help organizations understand what the opportunity is in their kind of technology selection as well. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And an extension to that is, without revealing your company's playbook on this, but let's say you've got one customer in, I don't know, I'm just thinking of an industry, automotive, they're really struggling. Is there any plans that you have in place to support customers on a pricing model that maybe extends over time? How does that work now with this economic crisis?
Yeah, good question. Microsoft actually has done a really good job interrogating the market analytics research on what it means to right-size pricing for individual marketplaces, for instance, manufacturers or verticals, as we call them.
Yeah.
And because of that, Microsoft has vertical specific licensing, government licensing, academic licensing, in the manufacturing space in particular, has what Microsoft calls the frontline worker licensing model that allows those industries to properly enable the users with productivity and collaboration tools where they might not necessarily need the full suite of enterprise licensing. They have what they need in order to show up, clock in, um, send email, check the instructions for the day, and then get on the line in the factory. And I think that to answer the company specific side of your question, we right size our approach to those verticals with similarly organized pricing. So we're going to treat higher education differently than we would an automobile manufacturer, for instance. We're constantly looking to iterate and refine that process. I don't know that we always have it exactly right, but to your question, it is something that we try to be mindful of in the same way, in a parallel fashion, alongside Microsoft's mindfulness.
Awesome. And we look at, in a recession, right? There's always opportunity for people to grow. And you've seen in your space that you're booming in the midst of adversity. And often people don't grab at the chance to grow there. So looking at your business model, the business as a whole, what do you see in the midst again of the adversity that's going on where you can grow? Are there any other areas that you want to go into? Maybe AWS, maybe GCP? I don't know. How does that future look like for the business?
Yeah, well, let me actually start my answer a little bit more personally, what it meant existentially for me to move into Microsoft as an individual. Very good with computers growing up, but I didn't want to focus academically on computers. It was a pastime, it was a hobby, and then anything that I've done work-wise around it has just been in the spirit of supporting my family. But after working help desk for so many years and taking escalation support calls at 2 in the morning, sometimes, and staying on a bridge for 24 hours, I felt like I needed to make a change personally to kind of up level. But if I could have a moment of kind of transparency and honesty here and help whomever might be on a similar journey where they're looking to get off the frontline support desk, there is actually a lot of stock at the moment placed in Microsoft education and certifications in particular. So before I was in the Pacific Northwest, I actually lived with my family in Utah. And when I first moved to the Seattle area, I was trying to figure out where to work. My wife had an opportunity that she was chasing, and I was in this whole new metro mecca that is Seattle, where Amazon is, where Microsoft is, where Blue Origin is, right? Nintendo, Pokemon, a lot of
Yeah.
big name companies are all centered out here, and even Google has a support office out here. And I was just like, what do I got to do to enter this space and start building out credentials as an architect? So I took a support job at Microsoft, taking calls, doing tickets, running chats, and managing customer premier support contracts on behalf of Microsoft. But before a year was up, I had turned my attention to getting security certifications. And a couple of years later, I had 9 or so certs in the space, device management certs and Microsoft security certifications, M365 administration, Azure security administration. And that opened up a lot of opportunity that I wasn't expecting. As an individual who changed goals at university 3 different times, from pre-law to business communications to digital comms, suddenly the whole of my professional outlook really shifted when I realized that my ability to translate end user compute issues into high level architect conversations with organizations don't just fix individual problems. Let's resolve the overall policy making for government risk and compliance for your entire organization was really surprising. I felt like I had that capability, man, but I wasn't aware that organizations were going to trust me as much as they did, and I was able to just kind of build the past 5 years or so on that. Now, that being said, we can't, to the latter part of your question, we can't as an organization ignore that there's more than Microsoft. So while we use the Microsoft technology as a sort of base operations, we do ingest AWS, we do ingest GCP. I haven't personally taken the time to really build my own administrative skill set in those environments, but I do help organizations understand what the cost of doing business with all of those cloud technologies is and how to get them talking to each other in a meaningful way, at least in terms of the monitoring service that we provide. So while I wouldn't stand up an AWS environment from scratch, I can certainly help organizations interrogate the cost and also move their AWS signals into the Microsoft monitoring apparatus if they need to. But I'd love
Awesome.
to get better, man. Always got to improve, right?
You've me and you have had some good chats about your personal goals and your family and sort of where you want to be in 5-10 years. But you made a really important point there at the start that you had 3 different career tracks. You only did tech for passion. Now there's going to be a lot of people who are young now who are seeing these tech layoffs. They could be 23, 25, trying to get into the industry. They might be put off. But for you, what would be your advice for people who, again, have not been on the linear path just in tech? They might be in a different industry. When they come into the industry now in support jobs like yourself, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them to get to a position like yours now?
You have a lot of experience that you don't realize is relevant experience. So in my particular case, I didn't exactly know what having done tens of thousands of support tickets over a decade plus of enterprise industry experience meant that I was qualified in a number of ways to have high level architecture conversations with customers, even though I wasn't necessarily skilled or a subject matter expert or practitioner in any one of the things that I was consulting against. So my first response, and I want everybody that might be listening that's just wondering what should I do with my future and how can I better kind of shore up and future proof my professional decisions, is you have a lot of experience that you don't know you have. And it's hard to see that when you're looking at a job description online and you're wondering if you should apply for it or not, and it says you need 15 years of this, that, and the other thing. And the reality is the organizations are probably looking for some subject matter expertise against those things. But what they're looking for as well isn't always clearly enumerated, and it's hard for organizations to write the thing down that they're looking for, which is the immeasurable thing. What is the quality that you bring to an organization as a human, as a communicator, as an organizer? And those are things you should not take for granted. And they are things I took for granted 100% because I looked over 100 job descriptions before I was just like, man, what do I do?
Yeah.
And that's often overlooked is really easy to take for granted what it means to be somebody who can connect individuals to a broader initiative and organize the note taking and organize the napkin math and the strategy overall. That's actually really important, but there's not always a great way to write that down on a paper, on a job description. And then to more succinctly answer your question, Microsoft Security, for me, I've been so successful because even though I don't have a master's degree in cybersecurity and I don't have, 20 years of cybersecurity experience, Microsoft's actually really young in the cybersecurity space, especially the
Correct.
cloud security space, very young. And so when I got a few of these certifications and I put them on my LinkedIn, I started getting pinged pretty much right away by recruiters who didn't know how to ask for what my experience really was, but they did know that that particular certification was tied back to perhaps the capability that the organization was looking for. So getting your M365 Security Administrator certification, the MS500 cert, getting your AZ500, the Azure Security Administrator cert. They're not entry-level certs, but they are key indicators for folks who don't know the 20 questions at a deeper level they should ask you, but on a surface level to get you that first call and to start building your network. It made a big difference for me. And historically, because I had moved around at university so many times, I was like, man, this education thing isn't getting me anywhere in the job search. So I kind of felt the same way about certifications, but that was a mistake on my part. So if you prioritize, and Microsoft makes their certifications fairly affordable, about $160 to take an exam as opposed to, like a CCNA, which is going to cost you thousands of dollars to train up for and then sit for the test. And by the end of it, you're not sure if you want to be a networking admin anyway. There's
Yeah.
really low stakes to certify against Microsoft security, and hopefully, that's a good kind of coaching point for folks that are looking for a place to start.
A question that you brought on to me there is certifications. Now, when you're hiring, how much importance do certifications take for you?
They're for me, because I have the level of knowledge required to really interrogate somebody's experience in the space now, it is less important. But oftentimes, I'm not the first person evaluating an individual. It will be a recruiter, or will be someone in our HR department that maybe can't ask the second or third order level deep question that they need to in order to properly vet someone's knowledge. So by the time a candidate gets to me, I might cruise through the resumes and just pick folks off the heap, and they may have a certification, but more I'm looking for them to demonstrate that they have practical communication experience with customers. So the certs are important to get in the door and have the conversations you need to with the subject matter experts,
Right.
but I'd say it's important for sure.
Yeah, to get your foot in the door, and then after that, it's all about your skills, right? Now,
Absolutely.
we talked a lot about your past, the different industries, the different degrees that you've been on. What's the future for Michah?
I think the window for Microsoft security is pretty wide, but I think folks have really caught on to it now. So when I started, I remember exactly where I was. I was working at my job just after Microsoft. I was working in that Intune space. I was helping organizations drive results against their device management strategy. And I remember talking to one of our security architects who represented the entire catalog of our organization's business, everything but Microsoft security. And so we had all of these folks who were hired to drive results in sales against Trend Micro and against all the other security vendors in the space except for Microsoft. They didn't take it very seriously. And I remember in this moment, they came to me and said, hey, I've got a customer that wants to know about this particular component of their Microsoft investment. Do you think you can talk to them about it? That wasn't necessarily my job to drive the sale. I was an engineer deploying actual
Yeah.
solutions, right? But they asked me to come talk to their customer in a pre-sales way, and I was just like, man, this is it. That's it. We need to just move completely over into Microsoft security because customers are going to start coming online and recognize that they can shift away from their traditional security strategy and consolidate in the Microsoft tech stack. So the reason that's an answer to your question, Aman, is because I think that Microsoft security is here to stay, and Microsoft is firing up some managed services of their own to compete in the space, to compete with some of their technology competition in the marketplace, some of the competitors that they have for Defender for Endpoint, for instance, like CrowdStrike and SentinelOne and Carbon Black. CrowdStrike offers a managed service, and so Microsoft is building a managed service of their own in order to compete with that in the space. So as Microsoft continues to get exposure by various organizations like Forrester and Gartner, the opportunity for folks like myself will only continue to grow. I appreciate an opportunity to lead initiatives around Microsoft technology that right-size solutions for customers. So I think I'll be here for the next 3 to 5 years, certainly,
Yeah.
working on kind of cool approaches to helping customers understand and evaluate the value of their Microsoft investments and whether or not they need a service partner like myself. Microsoft's still got a nice shine on it too, man, when it comes to the security side. Like, it hasn't been around long enough for everybody to hate it yet. So
Correct.
they're the young upstart. Everybody loves all the new Microsoft security tech, but I'll be here for 5 years, man. And after that, uh, I'm probably going to have to, along the way, expand my knowledge to the other clouds because Google can't be far behind, man. They've got the same things Microsoft does. They own an operating system in Chrome OS. They own a productivity and collaboration platform in G Suite. The identity side they're working on, they're going to build out similar capabilities, and there might be an opportunity for me to embrace those.
Growth, growth, growth. That's what I'm hearing for you. That's all that sort of matters for you directly. And to switch it on, and I've never had this before, but offline, you said you had a question or two for me. What
Yeah,
can I help you
absolutely.
with?
I've seen something from you, Iman, that's been surprising, and I'm surprised that I'm surprised by it. Only that I just don't see more of it from recruiters. But as an individual that's striving in your own way, I've seen that you've offered a lot of kind of consultative advice, strategic advice for young recruiters as well. And I've talked to a lot of recruiters, man, and most of the recruiters that I've talked to work for a shop, right? They work for a recruiting outfit, and I see that you're endeavoring to represent yourself as an individual in the space of recruiting more than anything else. So, what was the kind of primer for you to do that? When did you know that it would be okay for you to branch out on your own, to represent yourself as an individual? That's my first question. And my second question is, what prompted you to start coaching and helping others, doing a podcast like this,
Yeah.
and trying to give back to the industry of recruiting as much as it was a professional opportunity for you? When did it become academic like that?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not really doing it to give back to the recruiting industry. This is all geared towards my network and my market, which is security. In terms of gearing on my own, it's kind of always been a driver for me to go out on my own and sort of get out of the corporate world eventually. I'm still part of that corporate world and everyone knows who I'm around. They know that I want to go on my own, do my own business. And setting the framework now of branding, getting yourself on LinkedIn, and to be honest with you, sometimes posting some really thought-provoking, controversial stuff is pretty key to getting engagement, building your network, and giving people hard truths, right? People respect that. Showing my authentic self will help me in 5, 6, 7 years when I do go alone and can use all my experience to my own benefit. I don't know if I
Gotcha.
answered your question there, to be honest with you, but it really isn't to give back to the recruiting community. I want to make that clear. It is to help people like yourself who are hiring on a consistent basis so that ultimately I can help add value to your processes, your talent team's processes, absolutely, and ultimately the benefit of me, right? That's kind of where I sit.
I think you answered it. I just remember one specific post where you were talking about what it takes for you to identify key security talent, and it was specifically geared towards Microsoft security. So you were talking about enterprise, rather executive headhunting, and how to identify talent and what the strategy might be. So I read that as if I were a recruiter similarly in the space, there was a lot of really good takeaways from you there to get me thinking about what to look for and why maybe my existing strategy probably could use a little bit of review.
We can absolutely talk about that as well, and I'll have to find that article because I can't really remember it. I tend to write during the Christmas period a load of posts just ready for the new year, so these are all fresh in my head.
Yeah.
But look, to end this for you, basically, if any of my CISO network, CIO network, or even security engineering network, I don't know, if they want to reach you, where can they find you best?
Yeah, I have a LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn Mikey Heaton, and I'm happy to have academic conversations with anyone. Some of the work that I do as a Microsoft certified trainer, in order to renew that MCT status every year, we have to offer education and we actually have to run classes. And those are classes that I don't charge for. Those are classes that I just run in the spirit of renewing that certification. And that's a designation that I care about. So if you're interested in just getting a basic sense of what it is that you have at your disposal and how to use it better, I'm an excellent candidate to talk with you about that. But I also like talking to folks who are young in the space. I talk to a
Yeah.
lot of SOC analysts, folks who are brand new out of college that got a cybersecurity degree and have no idea what to do. They don't know what practical experience on the ground looks like, and if they're ever going to get a job as a SOC analyst in particular. Happy to have conversations with anyone that just wants to chat. I tend to be a kindred spirit because at the end of the day, for me, while cybersecurity is very, very important, the entry floor into Microsoft security at this point in time made it possible for me to take care of myself, my family, keep our home, and persistently move through difficult times that we've all been challenged with through the past few years. So I'm a good person just to chat with. Find me on LinkedIn and reach out. Be happy to have some correspondence.
Thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Thanks, Ivan. Appreciate that. I'll
Cheers.
keep an eye on you, man.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons in Cyber. I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode.